Hey guys, so just before we get into this week's episode, just a shout out to say thank you for listening and hopefully sharing the stories of the podcast with others. Last week's episode, 1% Better on Productivity, that was a solo show, part 2 from what I did a couple of years ago. Well, that was the most downloaded of all episodes since the first week and in the first couple of days, which is great that so many have connected in with that one. Productivity is a universal topic, one that we're all searching for. So hopefully you enjoyed it. If you haven't checked it out, do check out one of the others. And if you are listening to this one because you're a fan or a follower of Casey, do check out some of the previous ones. And most of all, if you can, leave a rating or a review or subscribe to the podcast. All helps get it into the ears of others, which is always good. You're helping others improve as well. Okay, enjoy the episode with Casey Lynn Hancock, from Air Force to artist, managing risk, balancing creativity and discipline. Thanks for checking it out and good luck.
Welcome to another edition of the 1% Better podcast with your host, Rob O'Donoghue.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of 1% Better, and I'm recording this one in my new studio at home. I'm calling it Studio 3.0. It's the first one I've recorded in this new environment, so it could be a little bit echoey. It's not soundproofed or anything yet. What's interesting about this episode and this interview is that the person that I'll be talking with is also very much in focusing in a studio, but more of an art studio, a paint studio for her custom portraits. Casey Hancock, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Casey, I think I linked into your work on one of the many social platforms that we all are on these days, and I was very taken aback by the quality of the work, the paintings you do. They seem quite unique. I suppose everybody's own work is a little bit unique, so I'm really looking forward to hearing about your approach and the style of work that you do. But doing the research, I was very interested in your backstory a little bit, and saw on some of the news interviews you've done, up to only 2 years ago, you were doing something very different.
About 2.5 years ago, I was living, I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois, and I was in the military for a few years and traveled a lot doing that. And I ended up in Arkansas, which I don't know if you know where that is, but it's in the South, and it's very different. We'll just say that. But so I was there doing marketing for a company and did that for several years prior to quitting and deciding to pursue art full time and move to San Diego.
Very interesting career change there from working in the Air Force to art. So we'll definitely dive into that. I always like to early on in the episodes kind of dive back into their early years of my guests and maybe talk about some of the early memories you have, and if art or artistry was something that was a passion even in those early years.
Art has always been something that I've loved since I was a kid. I used to just draw a lot of animals, and I was actually really bad at drawing people, which is kind of ironic because that's mostly what I do now. But when I was younger, I would just draw horses and animals, and I actually didn't start painting though until probably 6 years ago. But always been into art in general.
Any idea where that interest came from?
No, I don't know where it came from. It's just I just always wanted to draw. I don't know. It's been in me since I was a little kid, and I've always just been fascinated with drawing stuff, and also a perfectionist. So I'd spend a week or so on the same little drawing that I was doing, and I'd get so frustrated if I did anything wrong or messed it up in any way. I'd be so upset. But yeah, I've always been passionate about it.
And was it something anyone else in your family had a flair for, kind of art or design?
No, not really, actually. My dad is in sales and my mom trains German Shepherds. for police departments and personal protection stuff. So it was kind of actually completely random. I'm the only person really in my family that is into art or creating art. My brothers and sisters, they're creative, but it's just not their passion, I'd say.
Okay. And as you were growing up, your parents were aware of this passion that you had?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And my other passion is photography, and my dad would always, he'd give me these disposable cameras, and then I would take all these pictures, and then every other week he'd take me to get them developed. And then I'd use those pictures to draw or whatever. So he was always really supportive when it came to that as well. Yeah, they definitely knew that art is what I wanted to do. But the funny thing is my dad actually told me that, you don't want to do art. You don't want to go to college for art because you're not going to make any money. Is actually what he said, which,
laid it on the line there.
Yeah, he just put it out there. But to be fair, most artists do starve. So I get where he was coming from, which is why instead of going to art school, I joined the military.
Okay. And was that a tough decision to make? Was it obvious that...
It was and it wasn't. I mean, I always loved art, but I also, wanted to make money and be on my own. And when he told me that, I believed him. And like I said, he was probably right back then. But then the military taught me a lot of discipline, and then my marketing job taught me how to market myself, and both of those skills. And my degree is actually in marketing. So all of those things combined helped me market my own art, which is, I think, a big part of why it worked out.
Yeah, it's interesting as we go along these journeys that we're on, some of the skills you pick up along the way that you maybe didn't expect would be advantageous at a later point. What did you learn most from the Air Force then, from your time in the military, that kind of you use now in your work or in your developing career?
I'd say a level of professionalism and dependability, integrity, just common core values and things that, when you're dealing with someone, and there's a level of respect and just the way you treat people and the way you carry yourself. And also there's just a lot of respect that people treat you with, knowing that you've been in the military, which is awesome as well. But yeah, it was just really good in just helping me stay focused and just be accountable, really. It was they micromanage every single thing you do. So there's a lot of rules and a lot of regulations. It's very disciplined.
And discipline certainly helps when you're working in a kind of a creative way. I suppose balancing creativity and discipline are probably two things that maybe don't always go together.
No, they really don't. Most artists, I feel like probably their biggest downside, if you were to even ask them, would be that it's hard to stay focused or disciplined. I could spend so many hours on the same piece, more than I do already, but I have to have the discipline to cut myself off and say, okay, you're only going to spend this amount of time and then you're done. No one's going to notice this tiny little spot that you're going to spend 2 hours on. No one's even going to care. Cut it out. You're being too extra.
So it's a blessing and a curse at the same time sometimes, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah, it's true.
That level of focus. We'll get more into that in a little bit, because I totally can, I wouldn't say empathize, but I can relate to it, trying to put together a podcast, sometimes editing out a breath or an or an ah that nobody else would notice can really take a little bit of extra time that you might never get to the end of. But so while you were in the Air Force, was that passion still there? How were you continuing to develop your artwork, or was it something you were trying to lock away? How was the relationship with it during those years?
So when I was in the military, I think I expressed my creativity mostly through photography. I had a camera that I would just take everywhere, and we would try to go to a different country once a month. Just to visit and see. And we were broke airmen, so it's not like we had a lot of money. So we were staying in hostels and things. But the one thing I did spend money on was a nice camera. So I did a lot of photography. I tried painting while I was there, but like when I say there, I was in Germany for a couple of years, which while I was there, I tried painting and things, but there wasn't a lot of spare time because the military requires you to volunteer a certain amount of your time. You have to work out a certain number of hours and then also be at work all day. And they just ask a lot of you. So there wasn't a lot of downtime where I could relax and paint. So I just did photography when we would travel.
Okay, so that was still your outlet for the creativity, I guess. And then when you decided to leave and then pursued your career in marketing and graphic design, I think was the area. What were the draw into that world? Why at that point did you not go down the artist route? Did you think there was another draw into this world?
I'd say that it was still me keeping that thought in the back of my head, what my dad said about how hard it is to be successful as an artist. I still wanted to make sure I could take care of myself. I've been on my own since I was 18, so I've always been able to take care of myself, and that's number one. Art was always second to being able to provide for myself. So when I got out of the military, when I finished my enlistment with the military, and I started going to school full time for marketing. Part of why I joined the military was they paid for my college, all of my university. So I was going to school for a degree in marketing because I knew it was something that I could get a job in, before or after I graduate. And then I actually ended up doing marketing while I was going to school for it. And then once I was working there for just a little while, they actually saw that I was really into the creative aspects and encouraged me to do more graphic design. And they actually paid for me to go to an Adobe training class and get certified in Adobe for graphic design. So I was in a lot of schooling. I was doing that, and then I was a full-time student and working full-time. So art was, even then, I was just expressing it through work and doing advertisements for the company that I was working with.
Very good. So I know you mentioned about being in the corporate world, and the corporate setting was a great learning experience. What were the key takeaways maybe from your few years in that world that, much like working in the military, some of the things you took out that now are being beneficial in your current line of work?
Basically, the marketing aspects were, I knew how to market, but I didn't know to that extent. I did it was a large company, so I did a lot of business to business marketing, where I would travel with the company's vice president of marketing and things, and actually meet with a room full of buyers for a product. And we would pitch what we're doing on social media. I also helped with that stuff, and do product videos for these things and all the advertisements and things that we can also contribute if this company wants to carry that product. So it just helped with the professionalism, and then also just seeing what people are interested in hearing. When you're pitching to somebody, what do they want to hear? And it gave me a different perspective as to when someone would try to pitch something to me while I worked there, what was it that they said that made me want to listen more? So things like that.
Yeah, what I'm fascinated about, because I probably don't know a lot about marketing or advertising, the only stuff I've kind of learned is the last few years as I try to market and get the podcast out there, is I suppose there's a psychology behind a lot of it, and probably you're playing into what catches people's attention. Is there anything that stands out as you were going through those experiences that you realize now, looking at it from that lens, that you said, okay, this is how I can hook people in a little bit? Is there any kind of tactics or cool techniques that you use?
I think that something I've noticed that people who collect my art or purchase my art really appreciate are the time-lapse videos. They like to see the process. People want to know how it was created, and it got to the point where when people would ask me to do a portrait for them or commission me to do a portrait, they would ask if I could actually make a video with it. So that was something they started requesting as part of the purchase. And I make them anyways, just for my own marketing purposes. So that's not a problem. But I really enjoyed seeing how much people appreciated the videos. So that was kind of a big thing for me. And it's not something I would have thought people would care to see. And I still have people that ask me if I do live, like either live or if I just do real-time videos, really long videos of me painting. And I still don't do those because in my mind, I just think, why would somebody want to watch me paint in real time? That's so boring.
Yeah.
When people want to see it, I don't know.
People can be a bit strange, and I know they watch kind of Big Brother when that's on, watch people sleeping and things like that. So I don't know, maybe there's
yeah,
something
that's true.
going on in there. Interesting. So as you were kind of starting to plan your plan B, I suppose, moving out on your own, I talk to a lot of people on the podcast that are kind of in similar worlds where they've been working in corporate. They're afraid to take that step out. Those words are ringing in your ear from your dad, I suppose, to say, artists don't make money. What did you put in place so that when you did step out, you had some sort of maybe safety net? Had you certain things lined up? What was the your strategy there?
So I'd say I definitely planned for it. It wasn't just a rash decision. This is something I had working for about 2 years in advance. My company, the company that I work for, would send me to California sometimes to do business. And I told them they sent me one too many times because I'm going to move there. Right. And but prior to actually pulling the trigger to make the transition, I saved up enough money to where I would be okay if I didn't make anything for 2 years. So I was getting paid really well at my job, and I was living well within my means. I was really trying to not spend on anything unnecessarily. So I saved up a lot, and then I used that money to make me feel comfortable to make the transition, because I'm not the type of person to take a risk that big. I'm just not. And it's just not my style. I like stability and consistency. So it was the scariest thing I've ever done in my entire life. And I actually didn't even tell my dad that I had done it until 30 days after I did it. Because I thought that he would be upset about it. Yeah, exactly. I thought he'd try and talk me out of it. So I just didn't tell him. And then I moved to California, and then I told him. And all he said was, he said, I'm surprised that you did it, but I have no doubts that you're going to be successful at it, which surprised me, because I always thought that he thought that art was just not going to be a good idea. But I think he knew by this point in my life that I wouldn't do it if I didn't have a plan and hadn't thought out all of the things that could go wrong. So he just trusted my judgment by this time in my life.
Very good. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. The level of preparation you put in, the banking X amount, and I totally can understand what you're saying of, you would talk to a lot of people and they would say, you have all the skills and you're really talented, of course you're going to make it. And I think no matter how many times you hear that from other people, it sometimes doesn't sink in until you actually walk the walk yourself, or you think they're just saying it to make you feel better or whatnot. So that's interesting. And your level of risk, you have a low risk threshold, so obviously having that amount of savings makes you feel you could still live that lifestyle. So I think those are important things to get across, because you again hear a lot of people that just jump out and 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 2 months, 3 months later they realise they have no income coming and they haven't saved, and this whole cash flow challenge comes up in the early stages of a business.
Yeah, it's a very hard thing to handle. And art is expensive. Supplies are expensive. And I knew that if I wanted to live a comfortable lifestyle and not, be eating ramen noodles every day, that I would need to prepare. And I didn't want to sacrifice what I was used to and how I was used to living to do art. But at the same time, I was willing to do it. I told myself that if I went through a year of that money, and I was one out of 2 years, and I felt as though there was no hope, this wasn't going to work, that I would go back to working for someone else in a corporate marketing job before I let myself run out of money. Because the last thing I wanted to do is use all of that money, have nothing to show for it, and then have to start all over again.
Right. So you had a 2 year, you had your 2 year plan, but really 1 year was what you were willing to play with.
Right, exactly. And spend, money on investing into starting this business. And the first year, I'd say, I didn't really make a lot of money, but I didn't spend a lot of money either. My art business was paying for itself. But probably my rent was the one thing that was coming out of my savings. But everything, all the supplies, things like that, they all paid for themselves. And then the second year is when I was like, wow, okay, now I'm making money. Let's do this.
Very good. The confidence probably starts to soar then as well.
Right. Well, and even now, the confidence, sometimes you have it and sometimes you don't. You can have a fantastic month where I make great money, and then another month where it's slow. It's just, that's part of art. It's very inconsistent, and I have to try to be ready for those inconsistencies as much as possible.
Ride the waves, I guess. There, did you have any pieces prepared and sold just before you stepped out, or was it then you're stepping out and now you're going to focus fully? You just didn't have the time to focus on it beforehand?
Yeah, I did not have the time to focus on it beforehand. So I did one piece before I left Arkansas that was actually for a friend, and it was huge. It was was it 8 feet by 6 feet? But I'm not sure how much that would be in centimeters. I'm bad at that, but it was very, very large. And after I did that one, I was working on that one after work every day for a month right before I left, because I told my company it was New Year's Day, I think on 2017 or 16, I can't remember, but that I was going to leave in a month. And so I gave them a month notice that I was still be in the office and help them interview and everything. And then I worked and helped them a month remotely after I moved to California, just to make sure that person knew what they were doing. Because I really appreciated the company. I didn't want to just leave them. So I started doing a piece in the evenings after work and finished that one right before I moved out to California. But my body of work was so small because I hadn't had time to do any art for myself. So it was really starting from scratch when I moved out to California.
Can I ask you about kind of at the time, did you have any advice from people in the business of art or like any influencers that you were or even mentors that were helping you with the decisions?
No, actually, unfortunately, I really didn't. I had a friend who was an artist who did metal sculpture art, but I also saw him really struggle. His supplies were way more expensive than what I could imagine, because he was working in metal. And, I just saw he was a starving artist. He was willing to give up everything to keep going and doing art, regardless of what it cost him. And I just knew that's not what I wanted. And I had the marketing background to avoid it. And, and I just tried to use everything that I've learned to have a better understanding of what I needed to do prior to doing it than he did.
Interesting. Yeah, no, just thought it was an interesting question, because again, a lot of the time I talk to people that have mentors that certainly guide them along in the first couple of years till they're out on standing on their own 2 feet sort of thing. But it sounds like your preparation, I suppose, your planning probably has helped you with replacing that. When you stood out then and started, what was the inspiration for maybe the first few major pieces of work you wanted to put out and start the ball rolling?
The first piece that I did that really I felt good about and that I really planned was it's called Pilot Selfie. And I've actually done a few of them since then, but it was for a Marine pilot who had taken a picture while he was flying a jet and asked me if I could paint it. And it was 4 feet by 4 feet. It was a big painting, and I did it for $800, which is like nothing considering the canvas probably cost me $150, and I worked on it for a while. But at the time, I didn't have any other projects going on, so I documented making it and everything, and used that as my first project, and it got a lot of attention, which was nice. And then I ended up doing a few more of them with permission from the pilot who took the picture. I asked them if I could use that image to create more art as part of the deal for doing it so cheaply. And just remove, there was an identifying mark on the bridge nose of his of his mask in the original photo. And I said that I would remove that because it's a personal identification number for the military, and then recreate that image for a few other people. And so that was kind of part of the deal. So I did that, and that was really the first notable piece that I feel like made a statement.
And was there an initial breakthrough piece that got a lot of attention that started to ramp things up for you?
That's a good question. I'd say probably every once in a while I'll do a pop art piece that is more so for exposure than it is for selling. They'll still sell, but it takes a lot longer. But they do get a lot of attention and spread the word on social media. So I'd say I did a Biggie Smalls piece that got a lot of attention. So that was one that kind of, when people started asking and requesting things. And then also I did a piece for Dwight Howard, who's an NBA player, where he really likes snakes. So I combined all these. I used my graphic design skills to combine 6 different images to make the concept for this one painting for him, and then I painted it. But yeah, I mean, I'd say I just try to do different things all the time, and I like so many different styles of art that I just can't help myself, and I want to try everything. So I feel like I'm still just exploring, and I'm still at that stage where I just want to try everything, and people can appreciate that I'm just stepping out and doing random stuff. So I don't think it's like one piece. I think it's a lot of different pieces and styles.
Of course. And is there what would you call your style? How do you define it? Is there a name for it? Is there like an identity around it?
If anything, I just say it's kind of pop art, which can mean different things to different people. But I'd say people probably identify me most for just using teal a lot. I use a lot of teal. It's just a color I'm really drawn to. And I'm still trying to find my style really, and like what is that identifiable style that people, when they look at it, are like, oh, that is a Casey Lynn Hancock piece. And that's something that actually I still to this day struggle with, because I still want to try all these different styles and I still want to experiment. But at the same time, I also want my work to be identifiable. So that's something I still work on. I do realism, portraits to abstract to just whatever at this point. Whatever I feel like creating is what I create right now. So I wouldn't say there's one style.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm just scanning down through your website, looking at the different ones that are on the shop, on the old products, and
you can tell I can go through phases, and some days I just want to do abstract because I don't want to have to think that hard. And I like the way they just flow and create themselves. You choose the colors and then you kind of just let it happen. Whereas other pieces take a lot of planning and, editing and design prior to even painting. So a lot of these just take a lot of time just to create the concept. So I like to take a mental break sometimes.
Yeah, just interested on that though. Do some pieces take a lot more mental energy than others? And I guess that's probably an obvious answer to that. There's high levels of complexity to it. What are the factors that would make one more mentally draining than others?
I'd say probably the design. Design is probably the hardest thing. Once I start painting, I feel like for the most part, it just flows. Like I have an idea. I already know what I'm trying to do, and painting it is the easiest part. It's coming up with the concept and the plan and making sure that the composition is right, which is the flow of your eye through an artwork, a piece of art, or anything, a photo or whatever. But just the way your eye flows through the piece and that it looks good proportionally, things like that. And then just deciding on what it is you want to paint and what you're trying to convey through that painting. that's the most draining part, honestly. And lately I've also been working on doing realistic skin tones with oil, which I just started using oil a couple months ago. And I have found can be a little mentally draining, just creating the right skin tones, because they're not the colors you think they would be, which kind of makes you upset. It frustrates me sometimes because I'm like, well, this shouldn't be blue. Why am I using blue for her skin? In certain parts, but that's the way it is.
The teal piece maybe is kind of coming into play again there. Is there like from what I read as well, though, you've had no real formal training in any of this, right?
Correct. Yeah, I'm 100% self-taught, other than a couple of photography classes that taught composition and how your eye travels through a piece. And then, but not since high school or anything like that had I taken any art classes. So I'm all self-taught and just YouTube. If I don't know it, I will Google it and I will YouTube it. And for example, when I started working with oil, I didn't know how to even clean the brushes. I'm like, how do you get the oil off these brushes? This is not the same as acrylic. And you have to use like a citrus. So it's just a learning curve, but I love it so much that I will invest everything I have and all of my time into learning something new.
Learning is absolutely addictive for sure. And do you notice over the course of just creating even one piece or multiple pieces, your improvement in how you approach it, and does your speed at which you can create increase?
Oh yes, definitely. For example, about a year and a half ago, or not even, maybe like about a year and a half ago, I started airbrushing. And when I first started, I didn't even know how to hold the airbrush gun. And it would take me a really long time to do a portrait. And then it got faster and faster. And I knew which areas to be careful about, and which, areas I would have problems with, what to do first. So the more you do it, the better you get, definitely. And I just try to continuously practice. So even on the weekends, if I'm not working on a larger piece that's for sale, I'm practicing on smaller canvases just to work on technique and speed.
So you're literally just practicing a specific technique over and over again in a deliberate way. I talk a lot about deliberate practice on that. So that's interesting, because I suppose coming from a zero level of understanding of how to, I'm not an artist of any sort, and don't know how it's all put together, but it's just interesting how you would, like, if I was playing golf, I'd be practicing a certain shot. Are you practicing a certain stroke or just a certain shape, or?
A lot of like I said, right now I'm doing the oils and I'm practicing skin tones. So blending skin. And so I did an African American woman a couple weeks ago, and I feel like I can do those colors easier than I can do really pale skin. For whatever reason, the pigments, because I have kind of an olive skin tone, so I guess that might be why it's easier for me to do more of a golden complexion, whereas fair skin is so hard. I'm like, I've been working on it nonstop, and it's hard for me. So I know I can do it, and I just need to keep doing it, and it will work out. It's just practice.
When you approach a piece, do you do it in X amount of hour blocks, short blocks, or would you like work 12 hours on something? What's your approach to doing the work?
It depends on the day. So now I get a lot of emails and things to answer. So I try to do those maybe every other day for a couple hours in the morning. And then after that, I'm just painting all day. I'll paint until my boyfriend is like, you need to stop. It's 8:00 at night and I'm still painting, and he's like, come watch a show with me or something, like put that down, because I just become obsessed and I'll keep going because it's what I love to do. I don't know, it's just what I want to do all the time. So I will paint all day, every day. Interesting.
Would you ever get a scenario where, like that, you might be painting for hours and hours, and like, is there kind of like breakthrough moments where you can kind of get something just works? And I know sometimes if I am writing all day and I leave it for a couple of days, I come back to it, and then I can just really take off again and have that kind of mini breakthrough. Is there anything similar like that when you're painting? Do you kind of get to a fatigue state that you need to leave and come back, and then you're much more productive afterwards?
Absolutely. I have several paintings that are not finished that I just take a break from. And sometimes it's a couple of days, sometimes a month, sometimes it's a year. And then I'll circle back to them and look at them in a completely different light. And it really does help, because I do get burnt out on certain pieces, especially if something's not working or it's not what I envisioned. Then I definitely need to stop and start something completely different and just take a break from it mentally. But it really does help.
That's interesting. What do you do when you make like a mistake or things don't turn out the way, like I presume, have you got to nearly the end of a piece and you have to just scrap it? Just interesting how you learn from those mistakes as well.
Oh yeah, well, there's for the most part, I had to learn. I'm a perfectionist, so I want everything to be perfect, and I had to learn that it's okay to make mistakes. And with art and with painting, you could fix anything. So I have some paintings that have 4 other paintings underneath them. I mean, you can fix anything. It's okay. Because when I first started, I had these large canvases and they were so intimidating because you don't want to make a mistake because you just paid $200 for this canvas, and I felt like if I made a mistake that I had to throw the whole thing away. But then as I did it more and more, I'd say that's the biggest thing I learned, is that you can fix anything. Like, just step away. There's, I think, only one painting ever that I felt like could not be salvaged, and that's just because my own standard. And I was working, it was a portrait piece and it was for someone. And so obviously I have even higher standards for those because it needs to look exactly like that person. And there was one feature that I didn't feel like looked good enough. And I was just so upset about it. I was about to cry because I was so frustrated because I had been working on it for so long. And that's one of those I had to take a break from for a while and then try to come back. And then finally I was just like, something about this piece isn't working. And then I started over. So it took a lot more time, but I didn't want to put a piece of art out there that I wasn't proud of.
That's interesting. The perfectionist versus good enough debate is something I have with myself a lot, and I talk to other guests on. Do you feel that level of perfectionism can sometimes hinder you, and is there any wiggle room in it? Does your boyfriend or others kind of, say, look, you gotta kind of drop the bar a little bit?
Yes, like when he came home and I was working on a piece and I was about to start crying, he's like, it's okay, like just relax, like step away from it. I actually had to turn it around on the wall so I couldn't even see it and just walk away from it. But there's a quote that I heard that I find really interesting and true, and they say, perfection is the enemy of profitability. And to an extent, it can be, because sometimes we, rather than getting things out there, we get so caught up in these tiny little details that they hinder any chance for profit when you look back. But I mean, don't get me wrong, my standards are extremely high and I want everything to be perfect. But at the same time, I also know that I can get to a point where I will spend a couple hours on something that is not necessary because it looks great. It's just a mental thing in my head that I feel like I want to change, but it's not necessary.
Yeah, no, definitely. I guess they say if you look at any, the Mona Lisa probably has lots of imperfections on it that through our views wouldn't see, whereas they're obvious to the actual artist. So
of course, I'm sure I believe there are several paintings underneath the Mona Lisa.
I heard that.
That he painted over because he wasn't happy with it, and I can relate to that definitely. It'd be easy for me to spend a month on the same piece easily if I would let myself.
You said earlier on about being strict with your time management, though. How do you approach that now for a certain piece? Is there a kind of a formula you use for maybe the size of the canvas, or is there, how do you manage to keep things moving to get work complete?
Well, now I've done enough pieces to where I have a better idea of how long it takes me to do each type of painting. So if it's a portrait, it's going to take a certain amount of time, regardless of size. Sometimes the smaller ones take longer than the bigger ones. It just depends. But what I did was I have a spreadsheet that tracks the hours that I spent on every painting I've ever done. I've kept track of how many hours it takes me to do that painting, and then also how much I charged for it, and everything like that. So I can compare. So if you were to break it down and, and do the math, you could see how much I was making per hour, I guess you could say, and whether or not it was worth it, so that I can either adjust my pricing or speed up, or I know I can do it in this amount of time, so it shouldn't take me, this many hours. It kind of gives me something to reference as to how my time should be spent and how quickly I can do something as opposed to how quickly I'm doing it.
Yeah. Obviously there's a business element into it, so you have to kind of get solid with the numbers, and your return on investment is key.
Right. Well, and also too, just making sure you're happy with it. I mean, I would never put something out there that I felt I rushed or anything like that, but I also just, you just have to find that balance.
No, absolutely. I was going to ask you just a couple of quick ones before we wrap up, Casey. How do you deal with self-doubt, or I guess even fear of how it'll be judged, how your work will be judged?
That was actually probably the hardest thing for me. Is I felt it was easier to promote a product that I didn't even relate to than it was for me to promote myself, because it is such a personal thing. It's very, very hard, and if somebody doesn't like your work, it's personal. I mean, not that they mean it that way, but you take it personally because it's your everything. So I actually found it harder to promote myself. But when I'm feeling down, I just try to look for inspiration in other places and just keep pushing. I know that this is what I want to do. And if a piece doesn't work, or I get, some criticism about something, it's just moving on and just keep going. And there's Andy Warhol said that don't worry about how your work is perceived, just keep creating. So don't stop to see how people are responding or whether or not they like it. Just keep creating, and they're going to like something.
No, it's true. And I think the same is said for writing and even putting out podcasts. Just if I was to think about the people that mightn't like this, I might never do it. So I think it's all about doing the work and throwing yourself into it. So it's
just keep going, and they're gonna like something. I mean, and I do a lot of pieces that are completely different. So if they may like one I just did and then not like the next one and then really like the one after that, and it's just at the end, I want to say who cares, but if you're selling pieces and you're happy, and you're in a comfortable place, like, it doesn't matter how many people dislike it. It only takes one person to like it and buy it.
Very true. Last one, what is, I suppose, the major lessons you've learned over the last couple of years since you've gone out on your own, and ones maybe that if you had known earlier on that might have accelerated your progress?
I actually posted something about this the other day, and this is truly the biggest thing that I learned, is that don't wait until you feel like you know who you are to get started. For the longest time, I felt like I wasn't good enough to start promoting or selling my artwork, and that I had to be at a certain level before I could feel like a true artist. And the thing with that is I still feel like that today, and I'll always feel like that because I'll always want to get better, and there's always somebody better, and there's always another level to get to. And if I would have waited for that time to come, it still hasn't come. So that's probably the biggest thing I learned, is don't wait, just start. And people actually enjoy seeing the progression. They like seeing you start at one place and then how far you've come actually speaks volumes. So just don't wait, and don't compare yourself too much to other people. Just start.
Very true. The saying that keeps coming up for me when you mention that is that comparison is the thief of joy. I've probably said it more on the podcast in the last few months than probably too often, but it's so true. And
there's another one that says, don't compare your real life to someone else's highlight reel, because all you're seeing on social media and things like that is what people want you to see, the best of their life. And you shouldn't compare what the struggles you're going through every day to what their story or their, life seems to be like, because it's not.
Yeah.
And it can give you this false sense of like insecurity and make you think that you have to be at that level when, it's just a glorified version of what it is that they're doing.
Yeah, true. Well, I guess if you looked at the 1 minute video I put up of myself today, that's definitely not me at my best anyway, but I kind of try to buck that trend. Casey, it was really, really nice to chat with you. It's fascinating hearing your story. I love when I connect with somebody online and hear about all the work they're doing. I'm in a privileged position to be able to do that with this podcasting vehicle. I'll definitely keep tracking your progress. How can folks connect in with your paintings, with you, potentially buy some custom made work?
My website is caseypaintings.com, just CASEY paintings.com, and then my Instagram is the same. It's just Casey Paintings. And if they're interested in having a piece done, they can just send me an email through my website and I can give them pricing. Yeah, that's pretty much how it works. And my availability, I can also let them know.
Perfect. No, that sounds really good. I look forward to sharing this, and thanks for taking an hour out of your, I guess it's lunchtime or early afternoon there. And it's getting to 10 o'clock at night here, so it's probably my bedtime.
Oh, wow.
But I like recording at night with my US guests are generally nighttime for me. So brilliant to chat with you.
Yeah, it was so nice speaking with you. Thank you for having me.
It was great to chat. I'll keep tracking as you progress. Thanks so much.
Sounds good. Have a good evening.
So this is the outro of the podcast, guys. You got to the end, and that is great. Please hang in here for another couple of minutes. I know most people won't, but maybe there's something here of interest. So check this out. First off, thanks so much for listening to this one, as well as maybe the 100 or so that's gone before it. Why not check them out if you haven't already? There's lots of good stuff in there. The whole podcasting journey for me has been a huge learning, and I'm trying to help you guys learn and improve as well. So much has changed over the last few years since I started it. I've really realised lots of the goals that I put out there, and then realised so many unexpected benefits as well. And I think anytime you take on action towards a goal, you're going to pick up lots of things that you didn't expect along the way, and hopefully they're good things. In this particular episode, was there any one or two things that jumped out? Maybe you could take a pen and paper out right now, because this is something that you might think of during the episode but never do. Do it now. Take it out. Write down a goal that you're going to set yourself as a result of something you learned from this episode. Put a plan in place and then work towards it, applying yourself deliberately over time. Take ownership, build a habit, improve, get 1% better, share accountability with somebody you know in a buddy system, and learn and grow and improve. That's what it's all about. That's my, hopefully, inspirational piece done. Other areas to note: check out the website robofthegreen.ie. You can consume everything there for free. There is obviously the podcast, there's video, 1 Minute Monday clips, there's articles, not enough, but I'd like to put more there. If you're interested in putting one there, let me know. And there's a Get Better At page, which I'm starting to add new content to over time. There's a feedback page if you want to email me, rob@robofthegreen.ie instead. But it's all about trying to engage you and get you to a place of improvement. So I'm open to feedback. As I said, ways you can help me is by following me on the socials. @robofthegreen.ie is the website, or @robofthegreen on all the social platforms. Subscribe to the podcast on any of the apps that you might listen to it on. Talk about it. Tell a friend about it. Tell your family members about it. Share some of the ideas, not only to your friends, but to me. Is there anything I can improve upon? Sign up to the newsletter. That's there as well. I'm experimenting again with a group called Slack, Rob of the Green on Slack. This is really for a shared accountability environment and sharing ideas. You can sign up to that on the website as well. All of this is obviously all free, but there is also an option where you could subscribe to my Patreon site and make a small donation for the content that we do. It's there. It's totally up to you. Everything that is coming in through that or could come in through that will go into making the podcast better. So, to close, I am always trying to improve and get better. Change is difficult, I know that, but it's all about taking the first step, learning something applying yourself, moving forward. You can do this. I've been able to improve, pushing myself outside the comfort zone, learning, and I think if I can do it, so can you. Don't overreach. Don't set yourself unrealistic goals. 1% at a time is enough, but it's all about starting, and that will bring you on your pursuit of betterness to a great place. Thanks for sticking to the very end. Talk to you next time, and take care. Good luck.